Hey everybody, what's going on? This is another edition of Mosher's Mailbag. We took a little break for the holidays. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Happy New Year to all my Patreon subscribers and your families. Thanks again for all your support. And I'm ready for another edition of Mosher's Mailbag. The Eagles are obviously still alive. They have a big game Sunday showdown against the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. And perhaps if the Eagles win, I'll be doing I'm going to first of all, I'll be doing a mailbag for as long as I'm doing this Patreon site. The offseason will cover the draft, free agency, reshaping the team, all those things. But we don't want to get there yet. But perhaps next week we'll have another Mosher's mailbag talking about a potential matchup with the Eagles and the New Orleans Saints. I had some good questions today, really good questions, and I wanted to get to them right away. So the first question is, and I had a feeling this kind of question was coming. The question is from Frank G. If Nick does go win the Super Bowl, if Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl, do the Eagles trade Carson Wentz? So my feeling on this, and I talk to as many people as I can. I have never, ever, ever gotten the impression that the Eagles would be willing to move on from Carson Wentz. Given all the draft capital that they gave up just to get him, I just don't see any scenario. Well, most likely don't see any scenario in which they're going to go get rid of him. However, nothing is set in stone. I would say this. I don't even think it's a discussion among Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, Joe Douglas. I don't even think it's a discussion about trading Wentz unless Nick not only beats the Bears, but then goes to New Orleans and beats New Orleans. And even then, I think that's just when you maybe start to have the discussion and really ponder it and kind of go through the what ifs. I really think Nick would have to win the Super Bowl again for them to really have to grapple with this decision. But even if he does, even if Nick Foles does win the Super Bowl, I could easily see Howie and Jeffrey saying, hey, we're gravy. We just won 2 Super Bowls with a quarterback who's going to be 30. We have a 25-year-old franchise quarterback now for the next 10 to 12 years. Thanks, Nick. Say goodbye. Ordinarily, Howie would like to make a trade in that regard where you get something on your investment, but Nick Foles has a option in the contract so that even if the Eagles exercise the option on him for $20 million, Nick Foles can just pay $2 million of it back and become a free agent. And if Nick wins the Super Bowl, he's probably going to get $20 million, if not way more, on the free agent market. So I don't think he'll have any problems paying that $2 million signing bonus back and then becoming a free agent. And then he won't be giving up money by opting out of the $20 million guaranteed by the Eagles. But again, it's only to me a discussion if Foles beats the Bears and the Saints, and then it's only more than a discussion if Foles wins the Super Bowl. And I'll punctuate this again. Even if Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl, I'm not convinced that the Eagles would trade Carson Wentz. Frank also asked, is Wentz well-liked, and does this situation bother him? He is well-liked. I have never heard a single player in the locker room say anything negative about Carson Wentz, even when things were going rough this year. Did not see anybody frustrated with Carson other than Carson himself. But the question about does this bother him? I think as a human being, this has to feel like Groundhog Day or deja vu a little bit so far for Carson. I'm sure it has to frustrate him. I think there's no possible way that you can have both these quarterbacks on the team next year. And they're really good friends. They're both, men of Christ or very, very devout. But there is no possible way that the Eagles can have both of these quarterbacks on the team next year. It's just not going to be good for either one. Anytime one plays bad, it's going to be calling for the other. If they devote and decide that Carson is their guy going forward, they cannot have Nick Foles here. And Nick Foles doesn't want to be here as a backup if he has opportunities to start anyway. But I'm just saying this is it. This is the last hurrah at least for the current, time. You never know 5 or 6 years what happens. But this is going to be the last hurrah for having both Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. All right, next question comes from Big Daddy Kane, and he asks what I've seen on All 22 from Timmy Jernigan and Haloti Ngata. Are they making so much of a difference? So Jernigan looks good. I wouldn't say he's the monster against the run that he was last year on first and second down. There were times last year where Tim Jernigan, you may recall, would he would take one hand and just rip a guy down to the ground. Haven't seen that yet. I think he's not playing an entire game or what he did last year, and B, he's still obviously getting his way back. He's just really helping right now from a depth standpoint. He's still a good run defender. So just for him to get in there, it's fewer snaps for guys like who were playing earlier this year, Bruce Rendon and Trayvon Hester and things like that. So they finally have some solid rotation there at DT. And Haloti Ngata is one guy who has jumped out at me on the all 22. He's been faster, a little bit more explosive than I recall even seeing earlier in this year when he's healthy. He was clearly not healthy for a good part of the middle of the year. I think it was the calf, was it? Whatever it was that was holding him back, it was not completely healthy. But I have seen a huge difference, not only against the run, but every once in a while he gets into that backfield and makes a quarterback run around a little bit. So I think Haloti Ngata is coming right at the right time, exactly when the Eagles needed him. Third question. Oh, also Big Daddy Kane asked me how JP looks. I think, you go back to earlier in the year, games against Tennessee, games against Minnesota. I remember writing about it and talking in this mailbag about JP inexplicably getting put on his back by defensive ends or pass rushers, outside linebackers, and how much, he was struggling with the quad. This is before the biceps tear, and just how he looked like he was an aging player. Over the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've not seen him pancaked. I've seen him go up against some of the best pass rushers and hold his own. I have high confidence that he'll do a decent job against the Bears. I'm positive Vic Fangio, the Bears defensive coordinator, will take Khalil Mack and line him up outside left tackle a little bit and test JP. The only thing that I noticed with JP, he came out of the Texans game, which, very early. That's always a scare going forward here in the playoffs. And B, on inside moves. Remember, his right bicep is the one, although you're looking at it, I don't know, it might be left, but for the way you look at it, but his right bicep, his inside arm is the one that has the bicep tear. So when he has to block a pass rusher who puts a move inside, I noticed that his strength isn't there. I mean, he's probably lost some strength with the injury. So look for something. If you're going to look for something, the matchup within the matchup against the Bears, see how JP handles any rush that might go inside of him. That's up to, Isaac Seumalo, who I think is going to be starting left guard, and maybe help out if JP lets a guy get inside him. Last question from Zach Kaczynski, who's already looking forward to the offseason. I mean, gosh, we got a game coming up. Got a playoff game. No, I'm just kidding. It's a good question, Zach. He asks about the rumors about Deshaun Jackson to the Birds in 2019. And would Deshaun potentially settle for a 1-year, $4 million kind of minimum vet minimum deal that Mike Wallace did? Well, I think that it's possible. I'm not 100% sure. I think you'll hear the logical connections of Deshaun Jackson and the Eagles, much like you did last offseason, because everybody knows that there's a connection there, that he used to be here, and that helps the agent kind of drive up the price when he knows that the Eagles might get involved. That said, I have heard from some people close to Deshaun that he has always wanted to come back. He had a chance, I guess last offseason, but took the money with Tampa Bay that the Eagles weren't willing to commit. But at this stage of his career, if he wants to win, if he wants to play with Carson Wentz, he wants to come back to Philly, I could definitely see it. But, he's also good enough to still get a pretty good paycheck, and the Eagles don't have a ton of money. So always remember, when you see the Eagles and Deshaun Jackson, these rumors, a lot of that is fueled by their camp to let people around the league know that, hey, the Eagles might be interested, so you better pony up. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me if there was a reunion, and I know Deshaun would not mind coming back to play here. So that's going to do it for this week's Mosher's Mailbag. I hope I answered everybody's questions. Hope everybody enjoys the game Sunday, and cross your fingers. We'll see what happens. All right, take care, everyone.